She boiled a single pack of noodles under a flickering light while the city outside exploded in celebration. Her children danced in velvet lounges, champagne in hand, bought with the same credit card they never bothered to thank her for. Evelyn Parker sat alone, her hands trembling, her heart raw. Then her phone buzzed. Not a greeting. Not a Happy New Year. Just one line. Send more money. That night she didn't cry. She reached under the floorboard and pulled out something no one expected. What she did next will leave you breathless. If this moment already stirs something in you, don't scroll past. Like, comment, and subscribe, because the truth you're about to hear was never meant to stay silent.
The kettle screamed softly into the quiet. In the dim kitchen of a weathered suburban home, Evelyn Parker stirred a pot of instant noodles as if it were a ritual she had long stopped believing in. Outside, distant fireworks burst in waves of celebration. The city welcomed a new year with joy. Inside her home, time stood still. She placed the noodles into a cracked ceramic bowl and set it on the table. Across from her, an empty chair sat waiting, as it had for years. The photo of her late husband rested on the mantel behind her, his gentle smile frozen in time, a reminder of warmth long gone. The clock read 10:06 p.m. No calls. No messages. Just the low hum of the refrigerator and the pop of firecrackers far away. Then, her phone buzzed. A message from a group chat labeled the Parkers. Evelyn tapped the screen. "Mom, the bar tab ran over. Can you send your card code again?" She stared at the message. A second one appeared. This time a photo, her daughter and son, clinking champagne glasses in a glittering hotel ballroom, surrounded by friends. They looked radiant. Celebrating. Carefree. And not a single Happy New Year for the woman who had paid for their private schools, their first cars, their down payments. Just another request for money. Evelyn's hand hovered above her untouched bowl. The steam was already fading. She remembered when she worked triple shifts to pay off a tuition bill. The Christmas she went without a coat so her daughter could have a laptop. The night her son called her crying over rent, and she wired money without hesitation. She looked at the fridge, where a calendar still showed the month before. December. She had forgotten to flip the page. Her phone buzzed again. "Why are you being selfish? We're celebrating together and you never want to be part of it. You're always holding on to that money like it's more important than your own family." Evelyn placed the phone face down. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. Instead, she stood slowly and walked into her bedroom. The floor creaked beneath her steps. There, beneath her bed, hidden under a loose floorboard, was a leather-bound ledger. She lifted it carefully. It was heavier than it looked. Inside, page after page, her entire adult life was accounted for. Every dollar from her late husband's pension. Every diner tip. Every home care visit she had completed for the elderly. Every grocery receipt, every withdrawal, every deposit. Neatly dated. Lovingly recorded. At the bottom of the last page, the number stood boldly. $250,000. She had never touched it. She had never needed to. Until now. Evelyn walked back to the kitchen, ledger in hand, and sat in front of her now cold dinner. She reopened the group chat and typed slowly. "Call me next time." She hit send. Then closed her eyes. The silence of the house returned. The world outside roared with celebration. But inside her chest, something had shifted. Not anger. Not sadness. Resolve. She finished her noodles in silence, then stood and walked to the mirror in the hallway. Her reflection met her gaze, lines around the eyes, silver strands in her hair, but something else too. A glimmer. A spark. She whispered to her reflection. "Maybe this year, I start living." Morning light spilled through the slats of the blinds, stretching slowly across the quiet living room like a cautious visitor. Evelyn Parker sat at the kitchen table in her bathrobe, her hands cradling a mug of black coffee gone lukewarm. The scent of last night's instant noodles still lingered in the air, clinging like sorrow. She had barely slept. Beside her on the table, wrapped in a folded dish towel, lay the leather-bound ledger. The binding had softened with age, the corners curled slightly from years of being opened and closed with care. It wasn't just a record book. It was her life, measured not in years, but in small sacrifices. She unwrapped it slowly, like a precious relic. Every page held neat columns: date, source, amount. A $5 tip from a night shift at the diner. $100 from helping her neighbor after surgery. The monthly pension check from her husband's union, always written in blue ink with a careful underline. She flipped to the final page. $250,000. Her life's harvest. The morning felt heavier with each breath. The phone on the counter buzzed again, but she didn't look. She already knew what waited. More messages. More guilt. More accusations wrapped in false concern. She opened the browser on her phone and typed in the name she had memorized the night before. Mariner Voyages, the Infinity Pass. The screen loaded slowly. Sunlit decks. Smiling passengers. Endless ports of call. A ship slicing through deep blue water under the glow of a rising sun. The price gleamed in bold letters. $22,500. Evelyn blinked once. She could pay 10 times over. For years she had imagined such luxuries belonged to someone else. Someone freer. Someone younger. But now, at 62, something had shifted inside her. A quiet refusal to die in the same chair where she had eaten alone year after year. She picked up the phone and called the number listed on the website. A woman answered with a practiced brightness. Mariner Voyages. How may I assist you today? Evelyn cleared her throat. Yes. I'm calling to inquire about the Infinity Lifetime Cruise Pass. I'd like to purchase it. Today. There was a brief pause on the other end. Then, certainly. Do you have the required documentation and identification? I do. All of it. And how would you like to pay? Evelyn looked down at the ledger. Wire transfer. Full amount. They scheduled her appointment at the downtown office for noon. Evelyn hung up and stared at the phone for a long moment, her heart beating with a strange rhythm, part terror, part exhilaration. She got dressed slowly. A navy blue blouse. Slacks with a light crease. Her best shoes. She brushed her silver hair into place and pinned it neatly behind her ears. Before leaving, she slipped the ledger into her purse, nestled between her ID and the folded deed to the house. As she locked the front door behind her, a gust of wind swept through the yard, rattling the dead leaves and setting the porch wind chimes into motion. At the bus stop, the city passed her by in slow waves. People hurried, scrolled, talked into earbuds. Evelyn sat quietly, one hand resting on the strap of her purse, the other clenching the paper ticket. This wasn't a getaway. This was a declaration. By the time she stepped into the mirrored lobby of Mariner Voyages, she felt like someone else, someone closer to the version of herself she'd left behind long ago. The receptionist greeted her with a smile that faltered slightly as she laid the ledger on the counter and opened it to the summary page. Is this all yours? The woman asked. Every cent. Within an hour, the wire transfer was complete. The certificate was printed. The gold-foiled seal gleamed in her hands. As she walked out into the sunlight, the wind danced around her like applause. The sky was bruised purple when Evelyn returned home, the wind rattling dry branches across her front steps. Her shoes tapped against the worn tiles of her kitchen floor as she entered, the door clicking shut behind her with finality. She placed the certificate on the table and stood there for a long moment, staring at it. Infinity Voyage Lifetime Pass. Elegant script. Her name in bold beneath. It felt unreal. But reality came crashing down with the sharp chime of her phone. She hesitated. Then answered. It wasn't a call. It was an email. Subject, Notice of Petition, Parker Estate Review. Her eyes froze on the screen. Her breath slowed. It was from a law office. One she didn't recognize. She opened the message. Her heart began to pound. Her children, Michael and Rebecca, had filed an emergency motion. They claimed Evelyn had used family assets without consultation. That the cruise funds belonged to all of them. That the house should be held as collateral for the misappropriated inheritance. Attached were legal documents. Cold, polished. Full of coded betrayal. Evelyn sat down slowly, gripping the edge of the table. Not a phone call. Not a conversation. Just lawyers. After everything, every ride home from college, every last-minute rent payment, every quiet sacrifice, they wanted more. Not love. Not forgiveness. Control. She stood and walked to the bookshelf in the living room, pulling out the red folder she hadn't touched in years. Inside, the original deed to the house, bearing only her name. A copy of the probate court's ruling from 8 years earlier, awarding all assets to the surviving spouse. She turned to her filing drawer and retrieved bank statements, ledgers, and her pension letters, all meticulously archived, each one matching her entries in the leather book. The paper trail was unbreakable. But the wound was fresh. They had turned on her. She looked at the phone again. No apology. No explanation. Just a legal threat. Evelyn's chest ached with a strange mix of pain and purpose. She sat at the table, spreading the documents across the surface like a defense line. Then, she made another call. This time to Clara Raymond, an estate attorney recommended by a former co-worker. Within minutes, Clara answered. Mrs. Parker, I've read the petition. We need to act now. Do you have proof of independent earnings and sole ownership? I have everything, Evelyn replied. Every dollar is accounted for. I believe you. I'll file a response tonight. We'll request an expedited hearing. When the call ended, Evelyn sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. The room was dark now, except for the glow of the lamp. Her house, once filled with laughter and bedtime stories, had become a battleground. But this time, she wasn't defending anyone else. She was defending herself. Outside, the wind rose. The windows rattled. But inside, Evelyn opened her ledger, turned to a fresh page, and began writing. January 3rd. Legal response filed. House deed prepared. Documents aligned. She set down her pen. Folded her hands. And waited. The courthouse smelled of polished stone and quiet judgment. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Evelyn Parker walked slowly through the marble atrium, her leather shoes clicking steadily against the floor. She wore her navy blazer, the same one she had worn to her husband's funeral. It still fit. In her hands, she carried a plain manila folder. Inside were pages that could not be argued with, bank statements, pension records, tip envelopes, a certified house deed, and, at the very top, a photocopy of her ledger summary page. Her attorney, Clara Raymond, met her by the bench near courtroom 3. Clara was composed, with a calm voice that inspired quiet confidence. They're already inside, Clara said. Evelyn nodded once. Let's finish this. Inside, the room was too cold and too bright. Rebecca and Michael sat at the petitioner's table with their lawyer, a smooth man in an expensive suit, flipping through notes as if he already expected to win. Michael refused to meet her eyes. Rebecca stared straight ahead, lips pressed into a hard line. Evelyn took her seat beside Clara. When the judge entered, everyone stood. Then silence fell. The proceedings began. The children's lawyer opened with sympathy-laced words, carefully laced with daggers. Your Honor, our clients have great respect for their mother. But they are concerned that, in her advanced years, she has made a rash financial decision. $250,000, gone overnight. The funds in question are part of what we believe to be a shared estate, built during the marriage, and therefore subject to joint beneficiary rights. He handed over copies of transactions, including the cruise purchase, and cast a glance toward Evelyn as if waiting for her to fold. Clara stood calmly. Your Honor, the estate was settled 8 years ago. The probate court awarded full ownership of the house, pension assets, and remaining savings to Mrs. Parker. There is no legal ambiguity. All claims are documented. She handed over the ledger. The judge leaned forward. This ledger, Clara continued, has been kept meticulously for over 2 decades. It details every dollar earned by Mrs. Parker since her husband's passing, pension disbursements, service tips, and side income from caregiving jobs. All of it recorded. None of it contested. The judge adjusted his glasses and examined the pages. He flipped slowly, nodding to himself. Clara then handed over the deed. Sole ownership of the property. Title uncontested. She paused before adding, Mrs. Parker paid for her children's university tuition, covered medical emergencies, and paid off credit card debts, all without expectation of return. And now, when she dares to spend on herself, they accuse her of theft. The judge looked up. Mrs. Parker, would you like to speak? Evelyn stood. The room tilted for a moment. Then stilled. She looked at the judge, but her voice reached further. For years, I worked 2 jobs. I came home with sore feet and aching joints and still cooked dinner. I saved everything I could, not because I was greedy, but because I was scared. I wanted to leave something behind. But I never imagined the people I loved most would try to take it all before I was even gone. Her voice didn't crack. Her hands didn't shake. I didn't steal from anyone. I just, finally chose myself. Silence followed. Then the judge looked at the children's attorney. Any rebuttal? The lawyer cleared his throat. No, Your Honor. The judge took a breath. In light of the presented evidence and the clarity of financial documentation, this court finds the funds used for the travel purchase are the sole property of Mrs. Evelyn Parker. The petition to freeze assets and seize property is denied. The court further orders reimbursement of legal fees to the respondent. He raised the gavel. One sharp strike. Evelyn closed her eyes. Not in exhaustion. In release. As she exited the courtroom, the winter wind caught her coat, lifting it like wings behind her. Clara smiled softly. You were magnificent. Outside, a reporter raised a microphone. Mrs. Parker, anything you'd like to say? Evelyn paused. She looked at the cloudy sky above the courthouse. Then said simply, I spent my life giving. Today, I remembered how to keep something for myself. She stepped forward, each footfall quieter, lighter than the last. The morning after the hearing, Evelyn Parker stood by the front window of her bungalow. The house was silent, bathed in pale sunlight. Dust danced in the air like slow-falling snow, untouched for weeks. Everything in the room felt too still. Too heavy. She sipped her coffee without tasting it. The house had once been full of life, family dinners, birthday parties, late-night talks. But over the years, it had become more like a museum of things no one remembered. She looked down at the golden certificate from Mariner Voyages, still resting on the side table where she had placed it days ago. It shimmered faintly in the light. A key to somewhere else. She knew what needed to be done. Later that morning, she dialed the number of a local real estate auctioneer. A calm, professional voice answered. His name was Richard Myers. She introduced herself and explained she owned her home outright and wished to auction it, quickly and publicly. He didn't ask why. He just said, we'll need the deed, your mortgage payoff statement if applicable, and a brief description of the home's condition. Bring it in person if you prefer. I prefer, she said. Evelyn hung up and exhaled. Then she began. She moved through each room with quiet resolve, collecting documents, checking conditions, brushing off furniture, and pulling up curtains to let in the light. By late afternoon, she had packed a sturdy leather folder with everything Richard would need. The deed. The property tax receipts. A short handwritten letter explaining her sole ownership since the probate settlement. She changed into a neat blouse and slacks, slipped on her shoes, and stepped out into the chilled wind. The street outside was calm, children's bicycles leaned against fences, a distant dog barked. She walked the 4 blocks to the auctioneer's office, her folder tucked securely beneath her arm. The building was a renovated warehouse, now an elegant glass and steel office with tall windows and exposed beams. Inside, Richard greeted her personally. He was in his 60s, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. They sat together in a small conference room filled with quiet warmth and the scent of fresh coffee. He reviewed her documents, nodding at the clean title, the tidy file. This house will draw attention, he said. Good bones. Great location. Sentimental charm. You'll have buyers. I don't want to overprice it, Evelyn said. Just fair value. Enough to let someone else begin something new. Richard smiled. We'll start at a competitive reserve and let the buyers push it where it needs to go. I'll schedule the auction for 2 weeks from now. My team will print flyers, send postcards, and contact our list of local agents. Evelyn nodded. That sounds right. As she left the office, the wind swept through her coat again, but this time, she welcomed the chill. It reminded her she was still alive. Back home, she made herself a simple dinner and lit a candle in the center of the table, not for someone else, but for herself. After she ate, she opened the ledger again and wrote a new line at the bottom. January 6th. Filed house for auction. Beginning again. She closed the book and placed it gently back inside her drawer. Outside, the tree swayed against the evening sky. Inside, Evelyn sat in her favorite armchair, holding a cup of warm tea and staring into the soft glow of her living room. Not with nostalgia, but with goodbye. The morning broke cold and clear, the sky stretched wide above Evelyn's bungalow like a fresh page. Folding chairs were already set in neat rows across the front yard. Yellow tape marked the boundaries of the auction space, and a white folding table near the porch held clipboards, contracts, and a tin of hot coffee. Strangers wandered the driveway, murmuring as they inspected the home. Some were young couples holding hands, others were investors with sharp eyes and silent pens. Cameras clicked as a local newspaper photographer captured the scene. One banner read, "Widow auctions her home to sell the world." Evelyn watched it all from her car, parked just around the corner. She wore a long gray coat and black gloves. Her expression was unreadable. Inside her purse, tucked safely behind her wallet, was the original deed to the house, soon to be handed off. She waited until she heard the auctioneer's voice rise. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're starting in 2 minutes. Please take your seats." Only then did she step out, shoulders straight, hair pinned neatly back, her pace measured. People turned to watch her pass. A few whispered. One woman offered a soft smile. Evelyn returned it with a polite nod. She joined Richard Myers near the auction table. He looked at her once, to confirm. She gave a slight nod. The microphone crackled. "Thank you all for coming. Today's property is a single-family bungalow, 3 bedrooms, original hardwood, mature garden. Legal title is clear and held solely by the seller, Mrs. Evelyn Parker." He paused, giving the word space to land. "Our starting bid is $100,000. A hand shot up from the back row. 100, Richard acknowledged. "Do I hear 110? A murmur rippled through the crowd. Another hand rose. Then another. 120. 130. 150. Evelyn stood still, her hands clasped gently in front of her. Her heartbeat matched the rhythm of Richard's voice as the numbers rose. With each bid, a fragment of her past was chipped away, not in loss, but in release. 180. 200. Then a long pause. She could feel tension in the air now. A new hand lifted slowly. 220. A hush. Richard raised his voice. "Do I hear 230? The bidder from before hesitated, then nodded. 230. Another hand rose. 250. Evelyn blinked. That was the exact amount she had saved in her ledger. The cost of her freedom, now mirrored in the house that had held her sacrifice. The bidding slowed. Then, 270. A final voice called out, clear and firm. 300,000. A gasp escaped from someone in the audience. Richard turned to the crowd. 300 going once, going twice. He raised the gavel. Sold. 300,000 to bidder number 37. Applause scattered among the crowd. Some faces were disappointed. Others nodded in respect. Evelyn exhaled slowly. Her hands no longer shook. She walked forward and shook the buyer's hand. A man in his 40s, calm and respectful. He mentioned plans to restore the house. She wished him well. As the papers were signed, she handed over the final document, the deed. Her name, her history, now part of a new story. She didn't cry. She only smiled. The auctioneer leaned toward her and whispered, "You did something brave today." "No," she replied softly. "I did something right." She returned to her car and sat behind the wheel, hands resting lightly. Before starting the engine, she looked once more at the house, its windows golden in the morning light, the front garden swaying in the wind. Then she turned the key and drove away. The ferry terminal loomed ahead, a curve of metal and glass glistening under the mid-morning sun. Evelyn Parker pulled her small suitcase behind her, its wheels murmuring softly across the pavement. She had packed lightly, essentials only. She wasn't leaving to escape. She was leaving to begin. The Mariner Voyage's ship towered in the harbor like a floating city, painted pearl white with streaks of ocean blue along its hull. Its decks rose like terraces toward the sky, lined with gleaming railings and rows of potted palms swaying gently in the sea breeze. She stopped for a moment just outside the terminal doors, letting the wind brush across her face. In her coat pocket, her fingers closed around the edge of the cruise certificate. The other hand gripped the leather handle of her purse, where the ledger lay carefully wrapped inside. She stepped through the doors. The check-in hall was a polished sea of travelers, crew members, and soft jazz filtering through hidden speakers. At the far counter, a young woman in uniform glanced up. "Good morning. Name, please?" "Evelyn Parker." The woman typed quickly, then smiled. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Parker. Here is your keycard and your cruise schedule. Your cabin is on deck 7, starboard side. Midship, excellent location." Evelyn nodded. "Thank you." She moved slowly toward the boarding gate. Other passengers bustled around her, families laughing, retirees snapping photos, couples holding hands. She walked alone. And yet, she felt no loneliness. The walkway curved up toward the ship. As she neared the top, she paused. To her right, standing beyond the ropes, were Michael and Rebecca. Their faces were drawn. Pale. Eyes swollen, not from anger, but regret. Michael took a tentative step forward. "Mom." Rebecca's voice cracked. "We're sorry." Evelyn said nothing at first. She studied them quietly, searching their expressions for sincerity, not as a mother, but as a woman. "I accept your apology," she said finally. "But this is my time." They nodded, slowly. Rebecca's chin trembled. Michael tried to speak again, but Evelyn raised a hand gently. "Take care of each other." She turned, walked the final steps onto the ship, and didn't look back. A steward greeted her at the entrance, tipping his cap. "Welcome aboard, Mrs. Parker." She smiled. On deck 7, her cabin awaited. The room was compact, clean, and beautiful. Cream-colored bedding, warm lighting, and a balcony overlooking the sea. She placed her purse on the desk, opened the glass doors, and stepped outside. The harbor stretched wide behind them. The city skyline faded slowly into the distance. The ocean ahead shimmered like liquid silver. A low horn echoed across the water. The ship began to move. Evelyn rested her hands on the railing. The wind tangled in her silver hair. She breathed deep, the salt air sharp in her lungs, the chill brushing across her skin like a welcome. From this height, her old life looked small. The bungalow. The courtroom. The pain. All of it left behind on the dock. Below, champagne glasses clinked. Passengers laughed. Crew members gave directions. Evelyn smiled and whispered to herself. "This time, it's mine." She turned and went inside. The ledger remained inside her purse, unopened. There would be no more entries. Only memories to come. That evening, the sky burned in layers of coral and rose as the sun slipped beneath the edge of the world. The dining hall aboard the Mariner ship was alive with soft laughter, the clinking of glassware, and the distant hum of live piano. Crew members moved effortlessly between tables, silver trays balanced with poise. Evelyn Parker sat alone near a wide window, the ocean stretching endlessly beside her. The chair across from her remained empty, not from absence, but by design. She wore a simple navy dress, her silver hair brushed and pinned. A light shawl wrapped around her shoulders. On her plate, a delicate fillet of sea bass, a side of roasted vegetables, and a small roll of warm bread. Nothing extravagant. But it was her choice. The waiter arrived with a bottle of white wine. "Compliments of the captain," he said with a gentle smile. She nodded politely, raising her glass to no one. She didn't need a partner to validate the toast. She was celebrating herself. She sipped. The taste was crisp, clean, and surprisingly emotional. Her gaze returned to the sea. The ship had traveled far already. The lights of land had disappeared completely. All that remained was water and sky and the steady hum of motion beneath her feet. A woman passed her table, about her age, and smiled warmly. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" the woman said. "It is," Evelyn replied. "And quiet, finally." They exchanged no more words. They didn't need to. After dinner, Evelyn returned to her cabin. The bed was neatly turned down. A chocolate rested on her pillow, and a small itinerary sat on the nightstand: tours, talks, performances. She picked it up, studied it, then tucked it away. She had no plans to follow a schedule anymore. She stepped out onto the balcony once more. The moon had risen, full and luminous. Its light danced across the waves. Evelyn wrapped her shawl tighter and leaned against the railing. Her mind wandered back to the courtroom. The sting of her children's betrayal. The nights alone at her kitchen table. The way she had once held every dollar like a shield, afraid the world would take what little she had left. But now, the money had been spent. The house was gone. And for the first time in her life, so was the fear. She thought of the ledger, still resting at the bottom of her purse. Not as a symbol of wealth, but as a testament. A story written in effort. Every line inked with sacrifice. She would keep it. But she wouldn't add to it anymore. This chapter didn't belong in the book. It belonged to her. Evelyn closed her eyes and let the rhythm of the ocean sway her gently, like a lullaby hummed by the universe itself. The stars above blinked softly in the vast dark sky. Below, waves carried her forward, not toward a destination, but into a life finally lived. The next morning, Evelyn woke to the sound of soft bells chiming through the ship's intercom. A voice followed, calm and serene. "All guests are invited to the bow deck at 9 a.m. for our welcome blessing ceremony. Dress warmly, and bring your cruise pass." She sat up slowly, the light filtering through the curtains pale and clean. Her joints ached as always, but her mind felt light. Rested. She moved through her morning routine with care. A warm shower. A soft sweater. Light makeup. She pinned back her silver hair and slipped the golden certificate into her coat pocket. Then she stepped out and followed the quiet flow of passengers moving through the corridors. The bow deck was lined with railings, benches, and clusters of travelers gazing into the open blue. The sun was gentle, the wind brisk but not cruel. The scent of sea salt clung to everything. A small platform had been set up near the front, where the ship's chaplain, a woman in a flowing navy robe, stood beside a brass bell and a simple birchwood sign etched in calligraphy. Freedom at Sea. January 2nd, 2025. As guests settled into place, the chaplain welcomed them. "Each of you is here not just for a vacation, but for a new beginning," she said. "We invite those who feel called to share a few words. What brought you aboard? What do you leave behind?" A young couple stepped forward first. They spoke of early retirement, of wanting to see the world before starting a family. Their fingers were tightly entwined. Next came a retired teacher, who had once dreamed of walking the ruins of Rome. Then a man recovering from a heart attack, grateful for another chance. Then, without quite realizing she had moved, Evelyn found herself stepping onto the platform. All eyes turned to her. She reached into her pocket, removed the certificate, and held it in both hands. "My name is Evelyn Parker," she said softly. "I spent most of my life serving others. My husband. My children. My neighbors. I worked 2 jobs, skipped meals, buried my dreams, and saved every dollar, not for luxury, but for survival. She paused, not out of hesitation, but to choose her words carefully. 2 nights ago, I ate instant noodles alone on New Year's Eve while my children partied without me. When they asked for more money, I realized they weren't asking because they needed it. They were asking because I had always said yes. A hush spread across the deck. I bought this pass with the money they believed belonged to them. But it doesn't. It never did. It came from long nights, aching backs, and choices I never thought I'd have the courage to make. This voyage is for me. Her voice held steady. Even as her eyes blurred with salt, not from the wind, but from something deeper. I don't need to be needed anymore. I need to be free. The chaplain bowed her head. Thank you, Mrs. Parker. A moment of silence followed. Then a ripple of applause, not loud, not theatrical, but sincere. A crew member stepped forward with a bottle of sparkling cider. He uncorked it, and the chaplain raised a silver chalice. In the name of new beginnings and old courage, she said, we christen this voyage and every heart aboard. The cider splashed against the side of the ship with a soft fizz. Evelyn stepped back, the sea wind lifting her scarf just slightly as the passengers clapped again. A little girl in the front row reached up and handed her a white flower. Evelyn took it, smiled, and tucked it gently into her coat pocket. She returned to the railing. Below, the waves shimmered like polished glass. Ahead, the horizon waited. The sun hung higher in the sky now, scattering silver across the open sea. Evelyn Parker wandered the upper deck alone, the sound of waves brushing the hull a steady, calming rhythm. Around her, life unfolded in cheerful fragments, laughter from the poolside, footsteps from the promenade, the distant melody of a violin warming up in the music lounge. She felt no need to speak. No urgency to join. For the first time in years, silence didn't feel like absence. It felt like presence. She found a quiet corner of the observation lounge and took a seat beside the window, her golden cruise pass tucked into the inner pocket of her coat. The staff had already begun to learn her name. One waiter offered her a warm chamomile tea without asking. She accepted with a soft nod. She sipped slowly, gazing out at the infinite blue. The weight she'd carried for decades, unseen, unspoken, had begun to dissolve, layer by layer. She felt it with every sunrise she didn't wake up to an alarm. With every dollar she no longer had to count. With every hour that belonged entirely to her. Later that afternoon, she returned to her cabin. Sunlight streamed across the floor, and the gentle rocking of the ship gave the room a soft, floating stillness. She opened the drawer and looked at the leather ledger, resting beneath her scarves. She hadn't touched it since the auction. She reached for it now, not to add another line, but to close it. She ran her fingers over the cover. Her eyes lingered on the indent where the leather had softened beneath her thumb over the years. Then, with quiet certainty, she tucked it into her suitcase. She would keep it. But she wouldn't live by it anymore. That evening, the ship hosted a New Year's Day revival in the Grand Ballroom, a second celebration for those who had left too much behind on the first. Evelyn dressed carefully. A silk scarf. Modest earrings. The soft black shoes her husband had once said made her look like she was about to dance. She entered the ballroom beneath a canopy of golden lights. Chandeliers sparkled above a polished floor where passengers glided in slow, elegant circles. The band played a waltz. The air shimmered with laughter and soft perfume. Evelyn stood at the edge of the floor, hands clasped. A man in a dark vest approached, perhaps 65, with kind eyes and a cautious smile. "May I?" he asked, extending a hand. She hesitated. Decades of saying no, of watching from the sidelines, had trained her to stay still. But she wasn't that woman anymore. She placed her hand in his. They danced slowly, her steps unsure at first, but then, memory returned. The rhythm. The movement. The surrender to music. Her feet found the beat, and her body remembered what it was to feel light. She laughed once, softly, unexpectedly. He smiled. The music swelled. And for that moment, Evelyn was not a widow. Not a caregiver. Not a ledger keeper. Not the woman her children had accused or forgotten. She was simply Evelyn. A woman at sea, wrapped in light. When the song ended, she thanked the man and stepped outside to the deck. The night had deepened. Stars glittered across the sky like scattered coins. The ship's wake stretched behind them in a trail of white foam and memory. Evelyn leaned on the railing, the wind cool on her cheeks. She whispered into the night. "Thank you for waiting." It wasn't clear who she meant, perhaps the sea, perhaps the woman she used to be. She closed her eyes and let the breeze carry the last fragments of the past away. Tomorrow, a new port awaited. And she would arrive not as a guest, but as someone finally, fully, free.